and welcome to the final day here at the Soccerex Global Convention here in the Academy. My name is Eoin Connolly, I'm the editor of Sports Pro, and we're going to be talking to you this morning a bit about the international development strategies and marketing strategies that clubs have evolved to go into new territories around the world. Got a great panel joining us. First up, we have Drew Barrand, who is the marketing director of the EFL, the English Football League. Morning, Drew. We have Felix, who is the head of corporate development at VfL Wolfsburg. Good morning. Florian Riepe, who is the SVP of marketing and international markets at Hamburg SV. And Gema Baqué, who is the Sales and Marketing Director for SD Eibar. Good morning.
Morning.
Right. That's your panel, everybody. God, I'm a long way away from you guys, actually.
Yeah. Shift over a bit.
What's, all of you work in organizations where you're very kind of locally rooted. That's kind of always been the historical point of football clubs. What's the fundamental thing that you need to address when you're then going into a new marketplace?
I think certainly for us, obviously we've got 72 football clubs. It's quite a large stakeholder base. They're very locally rooted, as you say. I think the big missing piece of a jigsaw for us in terms of assessing an opportunity internationally was information. We had lots of information on fans who were going in and out of the grounds every single day and engaging with the clubs in every single way. But in terms of, sort of knowledge of how big a fan base any of these individual clubs had outside of the UK, they had no real information because there was no real set way of engaging with them. So there was no knowledge. So if people would say, how many fans has X club got outside of the UK, you were really guessing. And I think the opportunities that obviously digital platforms have created to address that problem is what's created the opportunity for the league and its clubs. So I think if it was one answer, it would be a lack of information has been the hurdle, if you like.
Yeah, from a club's perspective from Germany, I think on the one side you need a sportive success and a very good team on the pitch, but on the other side you need a clear strategy how to enter a market, and also a very clear USP for every club and for every club's brand. And in our case, for example, we have a very a big B2B focus and a sponsorship focus, as we are 100% related to the brand of Volkswagen as our main company. And this is like our most important fundamental thing for entering into new markets, I would say.
Well, for us as Hamburg Football Club, very regional brand at the end. And with a lack of success in the past 5 years, we really have to have our own story. And at the end, it's I believe, really all about the story you have to tell in different markets. And just going worldwide as a regional club, which is one of maybe 160 bigger European clubs, it's just not enough. It's not enough being a football club. You have to have your own story, and as you said, you have to have an USP. Different, of course, from a league perspective, but as a single club to be successful, work on your story.
Mm-hmm. I agree on the story. In our case, we are, the smallest club in La Liga. We are in a town of 27,000 inhabitants, smallest stadium of 7,000. We went to first division only 3 years ago. So for us, internationalization is really a big challenge, and it is very important to decide where you are going to internationalize, because obviously the world is very big, and you have to decide which are your markets, those where you are going to put all your resources. And for a club with a few resources like ours, that's a very important decision. Finding the right place, not only from a sponsorship side, but also you need a market where you can fit in, and there's some sort of connection that can be long-term as well.
I mean, with respect to everybody here, we're not, none of you are representing the absolute elite clubs, absolute elite organisations, for whom, you talked about it a bit there, Drew, yourself, there's an education element to it. But how much is, when you are operating at that level and you want to be able to, as you said, to tell a story about your organisation, do you need to really understand your community first and your, your local fan base, what you mean in that community, before you go and tell other people about it, basically?
I think certainly that much is true. I mean, as the guys said, it's slightly different when you're a league compared to a club. Our role in this is to create a platform of opportunity, which then allows the clubs to tell their individual stories. But I think the world has changed in the way that messages are broadcast out there. So it used to be all about mass audiences, and the bigger the volume, the bigger the piece, and the bigger the international profile. I think what the new media channels that have become available to us creates is that opportunity to have very targeted discussions. We're very aware that there's this huge differential in fan bases across our 72 clubs. Some of the bigger clubs have got substantial fan bases overseas, some of the smaller clubs have got little pockets, but each of those different elements, you can only really talk to them if you know, A, what your brand message is, but B, where they are, and specifically how you can get at them. And I think targeting is absolutely the crucial approach to this. This is not about, basically broadcasting to the world that this is what you are as a football club. This is about knowing where the people who have an interest in you are, and starting a conversation. And certainly from a league perspective, our role was to open that door to allow clubs to actually be able to do that.
What about from a club perspective, guys? If you're reaching new fans in international markets, you're basically asking them to come in and join the community that you already have, in a sense. So, I mean, where does that come into the conversation with new fans?
I think I just start because I think for the German clubs and for the Bundesliga itself, it's one of their USP that we have a close relationship to the fans and full stadium, and we hear the arguments of the fans and talk to the fans directly. But I think in every case, Hamburg and Wolfsburg is totally different, I think, because, for example, in Wolfsburg we have a very Volkswagen-based fan base as well, and the people are used to working, for example, for a global player, and the people are totally fine with an international growth strategy of a club and see that it's important for a business company to grow into different markets. And we were asking a lot of fans before that. Of course, you have totally different opinions in the different fan segments, but the hardcore fans, they say we regional first and then internationally. Growth is very important in the end, but the most of the people in our club say, okay, you turn into a business, and it's very important for the business to grow, and if you want to compete in the league, you need international growth in new markets. So there's a big acceptance in our case.
Well, in regards of fan base, Hamburg, I would say, is the biggest club in the north of Germany, bringing a lot of people together. So this is our core, where we focus on. And in total, we have like more than 900 fan clubs. Over 100 are around the world, and we just had instantly, I think 2 days ago, a fan club opened up in Buenos Aires. At the end, those are guys who are from Hamburg or the region and kind of take our brand out to the world. And this is something we are trying to help them to kind of get it started. And for instance, on the internet side, then you can look up, okay, where is maybe a fan club in Buenos Aires if I'm an expat, and where can I meet these guys, and where can we watch together football and have like this community. This is our first thought. Second thought, of course, is social media, which is great. But again, what's your story? I mean, if a player that nobody knows in China or in India or wherever is getting injured, we should be interested in that. So there's no relevance on that post, which is a huge relevance for all the existing HSV fans. But we don't have a Ronaldo or a Messi or you name them.
Not yet.
I mean, but sometimes I even have problems to know who the guys on the field are. And just the way it is, because players are coming in and out, and to find really a relevant story with them in a global market, that's tough. So you have to have some anchor points in different countries where you start out with. That's at least my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting to see how the clubs are very different, because in our case, it's important to understand that our international fan base it's most of it composed of shareholders. And this comes from the year 2014, when our club was obliged to do a capital increase because of a Spanish law that we had been in second B division for more than 5 years before, and we needed to have a minimum capital of 2 million, even though we were a club with no debts and financially sound. So we did a crowdfunding campaign, communication campaign internationally that worked really well. And at the moment we have 11,000 shareholders, and nearly 10% are for international. So our relationship with our fan base, you know, they feel really, really connected to the club. They're partly owners of the club. So there's a really strong connection. In our case, we really need to get close to them to keep that feeling of vinculation, of ownership alive. And it's important to, you know, use the social media and, you know, get your club close to that fan base to maintain it and obviously increase it.
In your case, Gema, as you mentioned, you're a small club in La Liga. La Liga, as they've explained a few times at this conference and around the world, have taken steps to try and internationalize their brand. Obviously, it's a league that a lot of people will think about the top two clubs in, to an extent, Atletico as well. But you know, they've brought clubs into that conversation about how you reach markets around the world. They've staggered kickoff times. They've, you know, taken all kinds of steps like that. What's your relationship like with the league, and what kind of input do you want from them when it comes to reaching people overseas? Yeah.
Well, not only in our club, I think all clubs in La Liga are getting closer, especially in the last 2-3 years, to the competition, to La Liga. As you say, they're putting a big effort in internationalizing the brand. They're opening delegations, own delegations in different countries, and they work with partners. And these are resources that we can use as clubs. So we support ourselves in La Liga a lot, really. Like this year, we did a couple of prospect trips to Japan and China as a club, as the Eibar, and we had the collaboration of La Liga in, you know, finding the partners in the trip, in everything. So they really are a good help. They're a good anchor in this.
I mean, Drew, you've kind of been approaching that from the other side. As EFL, you rebranded in the last year. You've launched a new broadcast platform, which I'm sure we'll get onto shortly. I mean, what kind of conversations do you have with your member clubs about the kind of work they want you to do to help their development in other countries?
I mean, we hope we have a good relationship with our clubs. We'd have to ask them, but hopefully that they would agree with that relationship. I think certainly the question that we get most commonly asked are, where can we create new commercial opportunity? You know, it's a very difficult financial market for football clubs to maintain stability and to grow and to keep going. And obviously you always have to look at new ways in which you can increase the revenue streams that allow them to remain competitive. And certainly, you know, for a long time, international had been this kind of white elephant in the room, but everybody thought, well, potentially there's more money out there, but no one really knew how to go about it. And I think in the same way that we do domestically, they were looking at how the league can help from a collective arrangement perspective to try and unlock some of these opportunities. So, you know, sounds a bit crass, but essentially, you know, their request on us is how do we increase money? And that's what we look at. And certainly, you know, obviously, as you say, we'll probably talk about the IFollow platform in due course, but, you know, that was the result of us looking at the international market and saying, okay, how do we create commercial opportunity, and what is that commercial opportunity that exists?
And yeah, from your perspective, guys, obviously you're in the same league. It's what, you know, do you talk to each other much about how you can build a platform collectively that better serves your interests overseas?
I think the points that you just said are very important, and the role of the league is also very important in Germany, because in Germany the league is more like a the daughter company of all the clubs and is trying to support the clubs with their commercial strategies, for example. But on the one hand, we need some assistance from the league, like for smaller clubs, for example. But on the other side, we need to have a commercial strategy and build our own USP and see how we can tell that story that you were talking about in different countries. And from my point of view, the league in Germany was way too slow in the last years. And for example, talking about the TV production in Germany, we decided on our own way to install a double production, like a virtual overlay light system, to have an international feed for every home game of VfL Wolfsburg, international feed for every home game. And we had some struggles talking to the league, telling them why it's important, why it's commercially interesting for the future of the German league. And we pushed them into that solution and had a role model in our stadium. And now the league is getting, I don't know how you see it, but now the league is getting into a networking platform, bringing the clubs together. Let us tell stories about and see how there are some synergies to go into different markets and tell the clubs how to enter if they need some assistance, but let some freedom if they want to do it on their own, like in between.
Yeah. I'm going to open it up to some questions in just a couple of minutes if anybody is ready for that. But you talked a bit about Volkswagen's role with Wolfsburg, obviously as the owner and employer of a lot of people in the local area and so on. How much of a role do they play as a partner in furthering your interests overseas?
That's very important, of course, and from my point of view, it's very important to tell that in the markets that we are 100% subsidiary of this big company, and there's kind of an image transfer from the brand of Volkswagen to our club, as Wolfsburg is more like a newer days club in Germany, 20 years in the German Bundesliga without relegation, but still not as relevant from a tradition point of view like the Hamburger SV, for example. And so we tell in the markets, if we're talking to different companies who we want to bring in as a sponsor, for example, Chinese tire big company, tell them in a few sentences what is the USP of the club. And of course, then we're talking about the role of Volkswagen itself, and we try to use it as entering into the club and the sponsorship deals and the partnership for the next years. So it's very important.
What are the kind of things that you're looking for from your partners? What kind of intelligence can they provide? What kind of access can they provide into new markets?
I mean, from our perspective, for most people, they'd probably be aware that obviously we just signed a new cup sponsor in Carabao, which is a Thai energy drinks brand. That certainly helped us get into new markets. I'm sure most people have read some of the things that have been happening over the last few weeks on that front. But joking aside, when you look at it and go, there's two things from our perspective that we can do. We can unlock existing fans. So the world is a smaller place. Loads of people who have come historically from English towns and cities now live in all sorts of towns and cities all over the world. So we can unlock existing fans who have that historical link with the fans and enable the clubs to have a dialogue, which then creates commercial opportunity. The second bit, once you've laid that layer, is obviously to try and grow it. And that can mean all different kinds of ways. It can go from clubs signing individual players in individual markets, which creates a short-term spike, which hopefully you then create a legacy situation out the back of it. Or quite simply that there's an affinity there and there's a story that you can tell. And I think certainly from our commercial partner program perspective, what we would be looking for them to do is to help us open those doors, to help us tell the stories of the clubs. And from a league perspective, it's really important to distinguish that the clubs come first. Fans are fans of the clubs, not necessarily fans of the league. We just want them to feel good about the competitions that their clubs play in and feel proud and use that collective power, if you like, to increase the exposure for the clubs. But when you're talking about that, you've got to let the clubs have room to breathe and tell their story. So we try to open the door and then take a back seat and let the clubs then work through that door. It's not always possible, but certainly from a commercial partner program, that would what we'd be looking for our commercial partners to do. And some of the things that we've done recently, the rebrand into the EFL, the launch of the IFollow service, has enabled us to have commercial conversations with international partners such as Carabao, and obviously the proof is in the pudding, that they went ahead and signed a deal with us on a long-term basis, and it will help us to grow certainly in the Asian market.
Now with Carabao, it's been well publicised the activity around the draws, which has not always gone quite as smoothly as you might have initially planned. But Where do you strike a balance there? Because you did something quite dramatic there and quite different by, scheduling them at different times and having draws in Thailand and China and so on. Where do you strike the balance between what your primary market needs, what your fans at home would want of you, and what's out there for you?
I mean, listen, the domestic market will always come first. That's our bread and butter. There's no way that we would be looking to jeopardise the relationship the clubs have with their fans and the commercial opportunity that exists domestically. Having said that, as I said earlier, we are requested by our clubs to look at new opportunities. When we're doing things in international markets, things don't always go exactly how you would want them to. But you need to try and strike that balance, and it is difficult on a case-by-case basis to try and do that. But what I would say certainly about the Carabao Cup element of things is that I've never heard the draws talk about so much in my entire life. So, if you believe in the rule of there's no such thing as negative PR, there's an element there where it has raised awareness, certainly of their commercial sponsorship and certainly of our ability and desire to take our brand and our club's brands across the world. And ultimately, you'd like certain situations to go slightly better than you would want, but the overall ambition is still there, and we'll continue to do things like that.
And just on a slightly similar point, I mean, in the German car industry, you had the Dieselgate affair a couple of years ago. What impact does that have on your relationship with a partner when there's negative conversation that has gone international, that has dominated the agenda and the political agenda and at home as well, but technically doesn't have anything to do with you at all? It's a separate entity.
Yeah, but actually I can say that, of course, we were afraid that there's some big impact out of this bad image from the car industry, especially from Volkswagen, but in the end it turned out to be quite well on an image point of view, and the people, they don't bring or mix up the topics of car industry and football, but in the first weeks we were quite unsure about the image transfer negatively to our club, but in the end I could say not a big problem. And even after that, Volkswagen as a brand, they totally understand that football is the right way to talk to the people on a grassroots level. And now they announced also the official partnership with the German Football Association and with the UEFA for the next European Championship. So we feel like the company is on the right way with their football engagement and with Wolfsburg as their main club.
Let's see if anybody has any questions on the floor just at this point. Just raise your hand. Yep, gentleman just here, about 3 rows from the front.
Hi, I'm Arthur from crowdfunding platform Fans for Club. I wanted to ask Florian about the future. You said you have currently an inside-out approach, let's say. The fans are taking out the brand abroad. But how do you think the future would look like, given that Bayern Munich is opening up offices in Asia and the US, and even medium-sized clubs like Eintracht Frankfurt are going to Saudi Arabia, US, and all these abroad tours? How do you think the future would look like? Are you pressured to do more?
Not really. I mean, you just can't compare a club like Hamburg with Bayern Munich, Real Madrid, or Manchester United. Those clubs are far ahead of all of us. I mean, there are 10 big clubs in the world. All the others, I believe, again, have to have their own story and have to see what are the right markets for them. And it will be very difficult to find brands that will sponsor you on a global scale. I mean, we have a lot of international sponsors like Emirates on the chess, we have Adidas as a kit supplier, we have Philips, Coca-Cola, you name them. Audi is one of our partners, but those are all either national or regional sponsorships. They're not using us as a vehicle in any other parts of the world, because our brand is just not well known enough. And I believe it's almost with all the other clubs the same. Unless you have certain stories that you can tell. One idea we have, for instance, is US market. There are about 30 cities in the US that are called Hamburg. Most likely these cities have been named after Hamburg because there have been people moving to the US many, many years ago and just called this city Hamburg. Sometimes it's only 400 people. The biggest one we found so far is 50,000 people. But maybe to create a story with them and tell them about their heritage, which is a big thing in the US, could help us to grow our fan base on an authentic way and not just the social media way where you get new fans following you, but they follow everything. I mean, this doesn't really give a true impact, at least for us. So we rather concentrate on activities where we think it has a certain impact also for us. And unless we win the Champions League, and not only once, which will probably take a while, as we've seen, last one was in 1983, and that was the only one.
Time.
But at least we have one. And it was called a little different, but the cup looked the same. So we keep telling everyone we won the Champions League.
Can I say something to that question?
Huh?
Can I also say something to that question?
Of course.
Because I think, from my point of view, there is some pressure on the clubs. And I think that there are in some years, like 5 years, there are some international relevant clubs in different markets and not relevant clubs. And I think right now there's the time to invest in different markets, to show the people that you are one of the bigger clubs who competes with the bigger, not Bayern Munich, Real Madrid level, but still is a well-known club for the German Bundesliga. And I think right now every club should think about international strategies and see what's the right way for different markets for them. So some kind of pressure.
No, I think that the difference is, and I believe you go the same route as we do. We have a B2B route. We're trying to find partners like, for instance, in China, a Chinese Super League club that we have teamed up with, SIPG, which is the Shanghai International Port Group football club, and Hamburg is sister city of Shanghai. And there are very tight economic relationships. So we use that, and now we are working as a business consultant for this club. So for the future, it could be that the SIPG fans start also looking at the Hamburg team, because we are trying to help them in different ways. And then there's maybe a certain interest from their fan base side. But I mean, in Germany, we're happy that we have about 3 million people who like HSV. But now to transfer that to China, it will be so difficult. I mean, why should anyone like HSV without the story? So our approach, at least right now, is it's a B2B approach, or it's like the fans that are already existing. And I believe for us, brands won't be interested in what we do, which is a little different of you guys, because you are VW. I mean, you have international partners. We don't. We are just a city club. We have a beautiful city. That helps us a lot, because Hamburg is getting more and more in the focus of tourism industry. With the Elbphilharmonie, you might heard of that new concert hall and the new seaport city. So it's really developing very, very well. That helps us as a club. But we have to take it from there. I don't believe that we have the power to be a B2C brand unless we have the next Chinese superstar playing for us. That would change everything automatically, but this also is not going to happen, because if there is somebody who's so good, then this guy would play for Man U or Real Madrid, and even if he's only sitting on the bench, they will use that. So no chance for us, at least I don't see it.
What's the potential scope of those kind of partnerships with clubs, though? I mean, yours is slightly different, because, as you say, there's a B2B angle, there's a kind of city angle. But, you know, technical and coaching and grassroots partnerships with clubs overseas, almost like a kind of twin town approach. Is that something that can have a really tangible effect, or is that something that's, you know, that has more of a CSR element to it, that's more further down the chain?
From our perspective, I agree with you that, you know, opening offices in different countries is a privilege that's only allowed to the really big ones who have the money and the reputation.
We have one.
No?
We have one.
Okay, you're much bigger than us. But anyway, there's another way of making connection points with abroad markets. As you say, for example, in your case, you chose a city, a sister city, but also there are certain markets like China that demand from brands or from football brands that sort of agreement. What they request is that not only we open offices and shops in their countries, they want to get something else from us. They want, how we train, information about training the kids, opening the schools, and so on. And that's one way that we can all participate, in building a brand internationally, because this is a win-win situation for both for them and for us. So that's one way of channeling it.
Let's move the conversation on, Drew. We did say we would talk about the IFollow platform, and obviously that kind of potentially changes the paradigm for clubs. God, did I just say paradigm out loud? For clubs, when they're, the relationship they have with fans who are watching them on TV potentially could be very different if they are able to crack a kind of OTT model. Yeah. And you've given them the means to do that. Now it's an opt-in platform, so you have how many clubs do you have on it?
So I think there's some quite important distinctions to make when you're talking about the IFollow platform. So the real reason we had the opportunity, in all honesty, was two things. Firstly is that we've got a lot of volume. So we've got 72 football clubs across 3 divisions, and from a league perspective, that's 1,656 league games. There is not barely an evening or a day when we haven't got a match on. So that's a lot of volume for anybody to cope with. Now, when you're looking at the traditional broadcast model, and certainly in terms of the international end of things, when you're doing international TV rights, obviously they don't have the demand for the 1,656 games. Even if you had a view where you wanted to sell them to it, they're looking at the top end because broadcasters have always operated on the bigger the volume of audience around a single match. That's what drives the value of the rights. So we've always been selling a package of 148 of those 1,656 for the international broadcasters to have. That basically left 1,500 games, which overseas were completely dark. No one was watching. There was no ability to watch. And I think it depends on, it's interesting earlier we talked about the definitions of success in this area. The reality is that if you can give a fan overseas access to watch their team, it doesn't matter whether it's 1 or 500,000, it's still an opportunity. And I've always said that our remit for being is to create commercial opportunity for all 72. So going back to your previous point about it's an opt-in platform. Yes, it is an opt-in platform, but the rights, the opportunity to stream those 1,500 games apply to all 72 clubs. The reality of the IFollow platform is one of history in essence. We've always had a historical collective almost supplier deal to deliver digital services to our football clubs, and it's on a case-by-case basis whether they choose to be part of that collective or do it by themselves. But when you're talking about the rights opportunity that exists there in terms of live streaming those 1,500 games, it's for all 72. We've got 58 who are part of IFollow, and the other 14 sit outside. All 72 of them can do it. It's just a different delivery service. So that's a really important point to make. The second thing about it is that when you're trying to create commercial opportunity, and it's fairly obvious to say, but some of the bigger clubs have obviously got substantial fan bases abroad that are currently existing. Some of the smaller clubs, less so. But for a club in a League 2 club, even creating a subscription product that didn't exist before, that can deliver 100, 200, 300 steady, regular subscribers, that's money they didn't have before. So there is opportunity that exists out there for everybody. Just the size of the opportunity scales up or down depending on the size of the club. But we took a step back and said, right, what can we do to engage with international audiences? And the most obvious thing to do is give them access to something that they've never traditionally had before. So, there's lots of little individual sort of human interest stories that really resonate. But I always remember one about a Birmingham City fan who was working on an ice station in Antarctica. And the only way he could possibly engage with his club was by a sort of in and out audio feed of match commentary, which basically it was touch and go where it worked every match day. We suddenly offer him the IFollow service at £5 a game or £110 for a season pass. And all of a sudden he can watch the vast majority of his team's games live from the comfort of his ice station.
Does he have
stuff
Wi-Fi?
like that.
He has Wi-Fi? in Antarctica?
It definitely works. So you've got to look at the value add that you can provide. And certainly, we were in a situation where, without affecting the value of our traditional broadcast deals, and the proof's in the pudding that we did a renewal deal for our latest set of international TV rights for the same 148 match package, and it went up 68% on the previous deal. So by carving out the 1,500 games to give back to clubs for them to be able to monetize, we didn't affect the value of the TV stuff, and obviously created a sizable multi-million-pound revenue stream that was entirely new, and probably the first new sizable revenue stream that clubs have had in probably a generation.
It gets you a chance to reach that sizable offshore engineer market as well. Obviously, for the three of you, you're in a slightly different position because you're all in the top tier, and the value of those rights is higher, and perhaps the appetite for La Liga or for the Bundesliga to offer a similar service to what the Football League are offering might not be as high at the moment. I mean, what would you see as the opportunities being, though, if you could create some kind of live streaming product where you're able to reach fans more directly, where they have greater control, if they're international fans, of what they are going to watch?
That would obviously increase the appeal of the club. I mean, nowadays we all move in a image world. Okay, so the success of the social media is partly because it's a movie and a video and a photo world, and when you have image and action, that has a lot of impact and a lot of engagement. So if we had the chance to, the greater the chance of achieving more people and them watching our games, obviously that would always work in our favor. But we have to take into account that we have to be careful with the TV rights that have been sold, and I guess it's not an easy deal.
But internationally, I think it's very important to have, or it's more important to have highlight clips than 90 minutes of football, of every game in the Bundesliga, for example. And we made some success that from this season we can use some highlight clips from our games on our social media channels Tuesday morning. So it's not very hot on Tuesday anymore, but still we can use it, and we can bring some appetizers to the people from abroad and show them the nice goals of our strikers and stuff like that. But in the end, if someone is very interested and supports the club and gets a fan, he also wants to see 90 minutes on the game and is not relying, for example, on CCTV to pick the right games and see if VfL Wolfsburg plays on this Saturday live on TV. So I think we should use more social media content, highlight clips, and then try to bring them over to some live streaming formats of the club.
I think it's really clear that obviously the accessibility and the desire of fans in terms of how they want to take football in, whether it's 90 minutes or 2 seconds, is changing almost daily. And I get, ever since we've obviously launched IFollow and we're one of the first league/rights holders to actually do that on such a scale, I get a lot of people asking me, so should we do an OTT service? OTT is not the solution to everything. What it has to be is a balance. And half of the challenge is trying to get your existing media rights contracts, which are often done on a long-term basis, to move at the same pace at which technology is evolving. And you end up in this situation where you're trying to pull back because the market has changed, but you're locked into a 4 or 5 year deal, which has a significant number attached to it. It's about developing a balance. There will always be a need for the mainstream TV approach. But it's about trying to look at the full jigsaw and go, right, okay, if we can create value there and then carve out this to do this here and then this for social, that's how you should approach it. And that's how you maximize the potential revenue. It's not about one replacing the other, it's a mix.
And we're getting into our last couple of minutes here. I'm going to ask one more question and then just open it up again to the floor briefly. Something that is a part of that mix for a lot of fans is not even watching football, not playing football, but playing video games, playing FIFA in particular, because that has a lot of the club licenses. That's the one that's most relevant to a lot of you guys. Something that I was in a discussion with James Kirkham briefly, who was on this stage I think a couple of days ago, from Copper 90, which is a fan platform, and he talks about the effect on younger fans in particular of playing these games and encountering clubs. They might be EFL clubs, they might be clubs from international leagues that they wouldn't encounter through TV, they wouldn't encounter through kind of following the game through the media, but then they want to find out more about them. I mean, how alive are you to those audiences and to to what you can do through that avenue? It's a non-traditional avenue, but it's obviously, you've sold your license to EA or to Konami or to whoever it might be. How do you join the dots there?
The one thing is that all the leagues have contracts with EA, and it's a strategic partner for all the clubs and the league, of course. But we saw that market, and we saw the development and the interesting target group as well. And in 2015, we in a trial and error mentality, we just signed 2 FIFA players for our club, and were the first with this. And we were not really sure if it's a good thing to do. But in the end, we were like crazy media reach with something like this. And in the end, now 2 years later, you see that it was the right approach, because a lot of clubs and a lot of media interest is in this field of e-gaming, football-related e-gaming in our case. And I think, talking about target groups, the problem that we have, and I think a lot of clubs have, is that people from 13 to 18, or the youth from 13 to 18, is very hard to reach, and it's very hard to create some relevant contents, bringing the people or let them stick with the club. And in the youth it's more easy, but in the childhood it's very easy, but in the youth it's very hard. And I think that e-gaming is a very authentic and relevant approach to have some content related to the club, but not directly from the 90 minutes of the pitch. And we are very happy with that. And even as a club like Wolfsburg, we gained some new fans with this. And we have another platform how to communicate with potential fans of the club. So we are very happy with the approach of e-gaming.
How important is it that you're ceding control over that content? When you talk about younger fans, one thing they want to be able to do is kind of experiment and approach things on their own terms. How important is it that they have, they're playing as VfL Wolfsburg in the game,
but with Ronaldo.
But with Ronaldo. Chance to be a fine thing, yeah. But how important is it that they're interacting on their terms? They're not being fed something.
But still, it's an approach how to communicate with new people who before that wouldn't communicate with the club. And now we create some role models. We have 3 players, an English player and 2 German players who play for the club and are something like brand ambassadors for our club, and give some sessions how to play with the new FIFA 18, for example. And I think that even if it's due to these young guys playing as VfL Wolfsburg FIFA players, it's a very good chance to for communicating directly with these youth. So.
Any questions on the? Yeah, just one here.
Yes. Hi, my name is Brian Schneider from the business intelligence agency News Tank Football. And my question is just in general about tourism, an open question on tourism. What is the club strategy to use tourism, local tourism, to Basque Country or to Hamburg, to Wolfsburg, and to get those tourists interested in your club while they're physically nearby?
Probably I answer that question. In regards of Hamburg, we see more and more international visitors coming, especially from England. This has something to do with, for instance, the atmosphere that we have in the stadium. And this is due to the ticket pricing. I mean, in England, as you probably all know, prices are going up higher and higher. And the big problem is, I mean, you make more money, but the atmosphere in the stadium is just not given anymore, because all the people with the big money are not really the ones who are there for the atmosphere. This is a little different in Hamburg, and since we are very easy to reach via British fans, they just fly over with EasyJet, spend a nice weekend in Hamburg on the Riepe Barrand, watch a football game with the atmosphere and fly back, and at the end the weekend was cheaper than spending one day at the football stadium in Old Trafford, for instance. So this is something we do use and kind of destination marketing, but we have to be a lot more proactive on that too, to actually advertise that this can be done.
This is okay.
Sorry.
No.
In our case, this is one of the strategies that we are approaching as well. For example, this year we have reached an agreement with the Basque government, and we have created a tour to visit our stadium, Ipurua, and it's been included in the top 20 tours recommended by the Basque government. And we try to align that visit with other things that are attractive to tourists as well. So a visit to the coast or San Sebastian or Bilbao, and we try to include it in a package.
But I think then here is maybe the role of a league very interesting because in a case like Wolfsburg, maybe a Chinese fan is not flying in to watch a Wolfsburg game, but maybe have a Bundesliga tour of 10 days and see like 4 different destinations of German Bundesliga and pick their right tour to get a feeling of the German football culture, for example. So I think this is something that is maybe good centralizing from a league's perspective.
Absolutely. I mean, from a league's perspective, I mean, we see it quite a lot, but certainly our fans sitting below the Premier League tend to be the ones who also follow England and also go around all of the various countries on tour. And you're absolutely right. We'll easily go every time they go to a different city. We'll go and watch a football game because that's their passion and that's what they love. And some of these clubs have got really historical links with the international market. You look at the case of Notts County. They've got this 100-year-old tie into Juventus, and we see it. You know, looking at the initial sort of subscriptions to IFollow, the Notts County subscriptions in Italy are through the roof because of that historical link. So, you know, it's not always about certain markets attracting certain clubs and those kind of links. It's about creating different opportunities depending on what the ties and the links are. So, you know, from a tourism perspective, to answer your question, yeah, the league is always looking at ways in which we can use the tourism card to basically increase interest in our football clubs.
I think that brings us nicely back to, we've got just one more there, yeah.
My name's Steve Menery from Play the Game. I was just interested in what part pre-season friendlies played in your international strategy.
You want to go first?
Okay. In our case, it's complicated because we're a small club and our sports managers and so on are not very keen on doing tours abroad very far in the pre-season. The post-season is okay, but not so much in the pre-season. We did a post-season tour in the US in 2015 that worked really well. It was kind of like a prize for the players after the season. But the pre-seasons we normally try to do in Europe, Austria, around that area. So we're working on that at the moment. It's more like an internal fight than a conviction from the marketing department because, you know, obviously if you want to internationalize, it's very important to go out there and visit the countries that you want to reach.
It's the same with us in Hamburg. Sport sets the rules. And after having 5 miserable years, it's very difficult to convince the coach to travel abroad. And if they do, and will lose the first game of the season, then it will be my fault. Not the fault of the coach and not of the fault of the players, it will be my fault. And if there's not a lot of money involved, so I can convince my CEO, then it will be difficult. I also raised the question of sustainability of these games. I mean, of course, it's great to travel to other countries in order to be present, and somehow you have to do that. But when we play a game against Lazio Roma in Guangzhou in 1 year, and next year we travel to Jakarta to play against Rotterdam, and the next year we travel to Hong Kong and play against you guys, nobody really will be interested in that, and there's no sustainability from my point of view, because the question is, what are you doing afterwards? I mean, I believe you have to have a whole concept behind it, how to keep getting a hold on the people who have followed that game, and that's a little bit the problem I see, because we are not on ground, and for me, actually the only solution would be to play over and over again at the same spot against more or less the same teams in order to get something growing. It's always different. If Man United plays Bayern Munich in Chicago in Soldier Field, everybody wants to watch it, but there's certain relevance because they're all the superstars. But if we play against each other or we play against each other, nobody in the world cares. It's difficult.
I think a little bit different, but because I think it's like the most important thing in an international strategy to be on the pitch and show your core to the audiences in your core markets. But I'm totally with you that, for example, in our case, we defined that every summer period we want to go at least once to China, and in every winter period we want to go to the US market. But of course, in the end, if you got nearly relegated like we last year, then you have the problem, and then you have to work on the strategy again.
Yeah, and we did it 5 times in a row. So,
but the last
difficult to explain.
But last time in China, for example, for our case in May 2016 was a big success, and we have good audiences in different cities. But I want to add one point, because I think one thing is the first team of the Bundesliga team in our case, but also we have a very strong women's team, and we want to use them also in our international strategy and in different markets where there's relevance for women's football. And our youth teams is also very interesting for different markets. So, for example, our under-19 team was attending the Weifang Cup, like a very big youth tournament in China, 4 times in a row now, and every time on the same spot, and building some awareness for our club as well, even with our under-19 team. So I think be present in the market and also see it as an invest. Of course, short-term revenue is the thing that we are looking for, but in the end, it helps you to grow your brand and be relevant in the market. So we try to fight every winter and every summer with the sports to fly over.
I'm very jealous.
Yeah.
Still football teams in the end. Anyway, I think there's plenty more ground we could cover. It's some really interesting stuff there, but we are over time. So thank you all for listening and for your questions, those of you who did ask questions there. Thank you to Drew, to Felix, to Florian, and to Gema. And I'm sure you can grab them afterwards as well. But have a good morning. Cheers.
Thank you.